We'll move on to our second presenter for today. It will be presented by Sreethu P R, a postgraduate student from the RV College of Architecture located in Bangalore, India. The title of the thesis is Sensing the Invisible at the thesis location Thrissur, India, guided by Brinda Sastry and Anup Nair under the theme Urban Networks. Sreethu, you can please start. All the best.
Yeah. Am I audible? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah.
Yes, you're okay.
Yeah, so good afternoon. My name is Sreethu. So I'll be presenting my thesis, Sensing the Invisible. So this thesis is about urban senscape. So architects, we all are familiar with the concept of place identity. So this is how we link ourselves to our surroundings. So there are three interrelated components which contribute to the place identity: the physical setting, the activities that happen within that physical setting, then the image of the place. Image of the place means symbolism, imageability, legibility, then senscapes, then our association with those senscape and the environment. So in this particular thesis, I'm going to explore more on that concept of sensory experience and association. So coming to the perceptual dimensions of urban designs, we know it's the vision, hearing, smell, touch. So all these sensory attributes contribute to the sensory identity of the place. But now we're looking to the current developments. It's mainly focusing on creating, rendering a visual image of the place. So the resultant, what we are getting is a sensory homogeneous spaces, which is either sensory deficient or sensory overloaded. So my thesis program is to identify how the senscape of the city and people's emotional association with these sensory stimuli altogether create a system of experience in the city. So in this thesis, I will be I develop a toolkit to analyze senscape and same toolkit can be used to improve the sensory experience of urban spaces. And in this particular thesis, as I said, we have 4 senscapes, but because of some limitations, I will be mainly concentrating on visual and oral senscape. And this study is purely based on the qualitative aspects of senscape. So structure of the project. So it's about developing a toolkit and apply the toolkit in a context. So the toolkit has 8 parts. The first part is I have identified few parameters which qualify the sensory stimuli. So for the visual stimuli, we have enclosure and visual terminus, and the sound stimuli is based on the source of this urban sound. It can be either geophony, biophony, and enterophony. And then how we respond to these sensory stimuli. So based on the theories of psychology, I have identified 6 basic emotions like happiness, sad, fear, anger, disgust, surprise, and memory, sense of time, sense of direction as the associations. Then as a part of the toolkit, I'm suggesting what are the methods that we can use to document these kind of sensory attributes. Then after the documentation, we need to put all this data in a mapping. So for that, I have used a multi-model mapping method. In that mapping method, we'll be mapping the sensory setting, the sound stimuli, visual stimuli, all together in a single map. Then, as I said, these senscapes are very subjective in nature. So we need to conduct a sensory perception survey. Then we get to know that what senscapes needs to be improved, what needs to be controlled and all. So there is a method I'm suggesting, like how to identify the stakeholder group and how to do the sensory survey. And once we get coming to the sensory survey, each questions in the sensory survey shall be related to one sensory stimuli, and the responses can be these emotions, what kind of emotion evoke in them when they are exposed to this particular sensory stimuli. What is the association with that particular sensory stimuli? So once we get the output from the sensory stimuli, we can do the sensory analysis. For that, we have the sensory experience wheel, and from that we can arrive the senscape indicators. So using the senscape indicators, we can develop guidelines for a multi-sensory environment. So I have applied the toolkit in Thrissur. So it's a city with a traditional city with rich daily and temporal senscape. So to identify the stakeholder, I have done an activity mapping of the stakeholder group. So I have taken the people who daily commute the city for different purposes, and their activity along in different time period of a day is mapped. And doing that, I identified the sensory route. So the sensory perception survey will be conducted along the sensory route. So in this particular contest, one route which is connecting two major transportation hub is chosen as the sensory route. And these are the sensory stimuli which is identified along the sensory route. For example, if you take this particular church tower, it's both a visual stimuli and a sound stimuli. So similarly, I have identified 21 sensory stimuli along that particular sensory path. Next is the multi-model mapping. So we need to do this kind of multi-model mapping for all major streets, open spaces, market spaces along the sensory route. So this is the demonstration for one route, which is called MO road in this region of the key plan. So first part of the sensory map is the sensory setting. So here I have shown the major visual cues, sound cues. And next part is the mapping of visual stimuli and sound stimuli. So when we take this particular street section, in this particular map, the visual clutter, the major visual terminus, the major viewpoints, everything is mapped. So when a person is moving from one point to another point, what are the possible visual cues he will be getting when he is moving through this. And below that, we have the sonic graphs. Here we can see like how the different types of sound is varying along that particular street. For example, if you take the first graph, it's showing the natural sounds. So this is dominating in this area because we have a landscape there. When we take the urban noises, it is dominating in this area because there is a market space there. So this is the sensory, multi-model sensory mapping. Then the sensory perception survey. So the sensory perception survey, it's based on, I have got 62 responses. And in this particular survey, 22 questions were asked, 12 questions were based on visual stimuli and 10 questions on sound stimuli. So the output from the sensory perception survey can be analyzed using the sensory perception wheel. So in this sensory perception wheel, each icon, this SS1, VS1, they denote one question, one sensory stimuli. And the second circle denotes the emotions associated with that particular sensory survey. So each line represents the rating that the participant given for each sense, each emotion, and the outer line is the associations, like how they associate with that particular sensory stimuli. Next is the Senscape indicators. So coming to Senscape indicators are the qualitative and quantitative attributes of the Senscape that needs to be controlled and retained to improve the sensory experience of that particular space. So if we take each sensory stimuli, for example, if I'm taking the case of traffic noise, it's an undesirable sensory stimuli. So the sensory indicator associated with that particular Senscape is that we need to reduce the exposure to urban traffic noise. To how to do that? For that, we have the multi-sensory design dimensions. For in this particular toolkit, I have identified 4 dimensions. One is the transition, like how we need to control the transition between the proximity of one Senscape to another Senscape. Then the pace and pattern of the movement, how a user is moving and what the path they are taking within the proximity of a sensory Senscape. Then the temporality, like there are some Senscape which activate some space during some period of the time. So these are the 4 dimensions to harmonize the sensory rhythm of the selected path. So using that sensory dimensions, I have identified 5 patterns for a sensory design. So this idea is to basically create a network in the city, a sensory route in the city. When we take the sensory route, it will be having a path and points. These points will be the source of a sensory stimuli. For the pattern 1, it's in locations where we have an urban edge. So the idea is to we need to integrate that urban edge, the edge of the water body, into the sensory route by applying these 2 dimensions. Next is the case when we have a visual landmark. So here also we can apply those dimensions to improve the sensory. The basic idea is integrate these kind of stimuli into a sensory route. Similarly, if an open space, instead of the open space can be integrated, we can create a route which is transversing the open spaces so that we can harmonize the different types of sound stimuli, visual stimuli available in the open space. We can merge it with the surroundings. Then for a built enclosure also, this kind of patterns can be applied. And in spaces which is dominated with human sounds, there also we can apply this kind of patterns. So next is strategy mapping. So what I have done is I have applied these 5 patterns in the context. based on the sensory settings. So the vision is to create an engaging and comfortable sensory environment for the city so that it will be strengthening the sensory identity of the place and thereby reinforce their place attachment. And this is showing the application of the context, application of pattern in the context. So the idea is to create sensory routes in the city. So along the sensory route, they can experience different sensory, like the different views, different sound stimuli, everything can be experienced based on the route that we designed based applying the 5 patterns. And this is showing the design demonstration. So like how the new different sensory routes is created, how new views are created, how new post points are created within the city. So coming to the implementation strategy, the thing is the multi-sensory design, it can't be taken as a standalone project. We need to integrate these kind of guidelines into a city development plan. So, and also we can identify a city level sensory identity, like many viewscape, soundscape, which is very important to the city. And we can create policies to preserve them, protect them. And also some kind of land use controls can be also be given. And the thing is, these sensory guidelines, it should be flexible. It's up to the architect, up to the planner who is doing. But we should give flexible guidelines to improve, to conserve and enhance the sensory stimuli of a place. Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Thank you so much, Sreethu.
Yeah.
Let's directly dive into what our panelists have to say. This time we'll start with Dr. Bansal.
Yeah, hello, Sreethu. Wonderful presentation. There are a few of my students who are working on walkability parameters, and they also talk about perception. But I think most of us really focus on the visual perception of the streetscape or the sidewalks. But I think a multi-sensory application or a multi-sensory intervention is something which is really very important. And the oral part, which you included in your whole study, I think that is something which excited me a lot. So I went through a presentation in detail before this talk, and I really liked your work and the way you approached. I just wanted to ask you something. Why did you just pick, besides visual, you just picked oral? What was the reason to that?
Because considering the range of proximity is high for visual senscape than sound. So because we have only 4 months of time to do the entire thesis. So I found that will be difficult. If I take all the Senscape, it will be difficult for me to do it. And it also done during a COVID time. So this some smell kind of things this sensory survey was very difficult. So I decided to concentrate only 2 Senscapes. So we have a scope to integrate sound also, like smell also, touch also into the same. So it's like a flexible guidelines of a flexible mapping. Yeah, so we can take it further, like adding other Senscapes also.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Sreethu.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Professor Park, please share your thoughts.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly.
Yes.
Sorry about it. So by the way, I enjoyed your presentation a lot, and then I think that expanding all sense of human idea is a great approach for urban networks. Although somehow it is really hard to just objectify, but I do appreciate pushing our boundary to the next level, not just limited by visual limitation. Also, proposal of toolkit is interesting when it comes to analyzing urban context. Although I have no clear background of the proposed area India this time, but I could have a glimpse of it, what you really want to achieve. Lastly, the general process is quite consistent and reasonable. Lastly, the few example of what you presented is very reliable for pedestrians. So thank you for your presentation and congrats for your graduation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mandor, please share.
I really enjoyed the presentation much, and I can figure out how did you merge this relationship between sensory as a human dimension and the physical aspects of urban spaces, and how did you merge, the quantitative to qualitative to set up a sort of a measuring tool as a ruler or something like this, which is based on the human senses. This reminds me of the theory of acupuncture. Do you know it or no? Acupuncture of cities and remedy of urban spaces. Actually, I like your presentation. I like the way you tackled the examples, and congratulate you much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, tutors. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Open